So we talked a bit about how, receiving the report, making sure that people are hearing about what's happening within their organisations. Once a report's received, it's important then to triage that report and to decide whether a formal investigation needs to take place. Now, companies will think about that based on the credibility, the severity, that kind of thing. So what sort of things do you think are important that, or what process should a company follow when they're triaging their reports? Dennis, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first thing for me is when a report comes in, you have to, I suppose from the beginning, who is going to be triaging it? Who's got ownership of that report? For example, if it's a disclosure through Safecall, a whistleblowing report, have a look at that and assess it from the beginning. Is it whistleblowing, or can that investigation be investigated under existing policies, bullying, harassment, grievance? And I think that's the first thing. Assess it, what type of report it is. And then and this is why I always look there, and I know things can change, but you look at the report and say, well, how severe is it? If it's, say, for example, you think, well, it's not whistleblowing, but it perhaps is more in HR, is look at it and say, well, if this was proven, what would the likelihood be potentially of the outcome? Because then you're looking at perhaps, is it misconduct? Is it gross misconduct? That would set the tone at about what kind of resources perhaps you're going to look at the investigation, how far the investigation was going to go, and it would set what we've told is that parameters, the initial parameters, terms of reference of how you're going to start investigating that disclosure. And I think you need to have that done very, very early on. I suppose in a way what I'm talking about there is an impact assessment, perhaps even a data protection assessment as well, just to get that early gauge of where's this potentially going to go. So I think that's essential at the beginning.
So I think consistency here is critical, and where we see investigations start off well is where there's been a really good protocol or triaging process, that you're not trying to make decisions on the hoof. You've got a process to work through. Is this a type of report that I move to an HR manager to investigate? Is it a type of report that I have my compliance function investigate? Is it something that I need a lawyer involved because of perhaps a legal risk that needs to be assessed, perhaps because I've got legal privilege concerns? And are there certain cases that I need external people to investigate, whether lawyers or others, because of the nature of the subject matter reported? I think the interesting point you made about severity and credibility of reports, one of the things that can go wrong at this early triage phase is where people leap too quickly into conclusion about a lack of credibility in a report. I'm sure we've all seen this, and things get missed. Another key pitfall that I've seen is that people making that early assessment possibly haven't been resourced enough to issue spot all the potential issues that could come out of a report. So you might have a situation where a report looks very plain vanilla, HR related grievance, but there might be something in there that gives rise to actually something to investigate under modern slavery legislation.
Yeah, well, very, very much with that, Neil. I mean, it's one thing clients quite often ask about what kind of things should be reported and should we not be taking reports of bullying. Just to support exactly what you say there, the question I would ask of someone who perhaps didn't want to include bullying in a speak up line would be, yes, somebody's being bullied, but do you know why they're being bullied? They could be being bullied because somebody is insider trading or doing something in procurement that shouldn't be done that way, and that the bullying is just the manifestation of the cover-up of what's happening underneath.
Exactly right, and I think if your triage process has made an early case assessment and put it into a channel and missed those other wider points you're mentioning, then some critical legal or reputational or economic risks for the organisation could be missed. And a process happens, the investigation goes down a particular track, and there isn't enough oversight, checks and balances in your triage to make sure those other risks are picked up and investigated appropriately.
That other bit of the triage bit as well is wherever whistleblowing, say, sits, whoever receives a whistleblowing disclosure has to be cited, say for example, as if it's in governance or risk. There has to be really good reporting channels, just Tim mentioned there about silos between HR and legal. Because you never know that that same issue might be reported here and here and here. So you're trying to have it joined together. So you're having the full information you have together to make that assessment. Because that assessment then will determine where it's going to get investigated and who you're going to appoint to investigate.
It certainly sounds as though it's really important, A, to make sure that you think carefully about who is triaging your reports, and then B, that they are trained to do that. Because what you're saying is that, you know, if they don't spot things or they're not trained to kind of recognise what's happening, then they may miss something crucial.
It goes through the investigation process, because say you're confident you can triage it in a particular direction and you give it to an investigator, they've then got to have sufficient resource, sufficient training to maybe notice that something's outside their subject matter expertise at some point in that investigation, and they might have to hand it to someone else. So it's a two-way street. But that's what an effective triage process should look like. That you're being consistent in the way you're handling reports, and you've got that expertise to
just add on what Neil was saying. This is all like a discussion, and you're having that. But what's a crucial part of this is where you're recording it. You're recording decisions at that moment in time, so you should be recording, and I say recording them. You're making decisions, but you should be recording them. Because further down the line, where there's potentially criticism, you're coming back to the starting point, because you might not have the full picture, because it's just an initial disclosure. So you're making decisions on limited information, but you need to be recording that. So it's there, because you're making decisions, and you perhaps in the future you might have to defend that decision.
That's absolutely critical, particularly if you're dealing with a serious risk later of legal liability. You might need to be able to demonstrate to a third party, a regulator, law enforcement, that at this point in time you had no idea about that liability. Yeah. And you've got a record of what you were told at that initial point. Because it means that in terms of your cooperation with others, you can show that you did act as quickly as you possibly could when you did find out about the thing that gave rise to that risk.
So it certainly sounds like there's a lot going on in the triaging process, lots of things to think about, lots of decision making. You know, it's important to have the right people involved in that process. We talked a bit about kind of gaining employees' trust in the process. So what should you be thinking about at this point with regards to your communication with the person who's made that report?
My view always is, if say the person is named, obviously, pointed as the investigator, but I think the initial call should be made, contact with that person. The disclosure might be quite detailed, but this person might have had whatever had inside them for 25 years. And now they've just got the confidence that they want to speak up now. So you want to be able to take them time to sit with that person and give them time to talk through the disclosure, because what they might give you is a sort of generalised view, but it's not giving you specifics. So you have to then go and sit with that person and listen to try and get in as much as you can to understand what they are actually complaining about and formalise what they're saying. But also, and that's building confidence in them, that you're going to be listening to what they're saying and you're going to try to investigate what they're raising.
Anything final to add on the triaging process?
It's just the start.